reader section of the New Indian. Today we have with us Uday Mahurkar, a veteran journalist, a columnist, an author, and for the last 1 year he has been India's Information Commissioner. We are going to discuss his latest book, Veer Savarkar, the man who could have prevented the partition. I am going to begin this conversation with a very simple question. Do you think history is being rewritten for the first time in India's history? Because in the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of new literature has emerged on controversial figures like Veer Savarkar. Is the right wing in India trying to rewrite history?
No, it is trying to rewrite history which was wrongly written. So it is correction, it is a movement to correct history. Truth cannot be hidden, cannot be suppressed beyond a point. Truth was suppressed for many decades after India's independence, and now it is coming out. It's a natural process.
So would you say that it was necessary to rewrite history in this way and not actually correct the textual books which have been creating a certain perception? For example, in Veer Savarkar's case, what we studied from our NCERT books was a very negative image of Veer Savarkar. Why aren't we correcting history books, and why is it upon Uday Mahurkar's and Vikram Sampath's of the world who are now correcting history?
The process has begun. I mean, this government came to power in 2014. The process has begun. So, correction in textbooks has also begun, and it will continue further, you know. There is a new education policy which does focus on this particular issue, you know. So, in our case, we were, you know, in my case, I was out to project the right Savarkar before the nation. And I thought that Savarkar, when he was being reviled and you know, portrayed as a demon by a section of thinkers of left, you know, by parties which were captive of vote bank politics, you know. So the way he was being defended, I thought there was something lacking in that. They used to say that he was a great patriot. He passed the most rigorous imprisonment in a cellular jail. I thought that Savarkar has much more to offer. Savarkar efforts to prevent partition, his vision for India's national security.
Let me interrupt you here. You titled the book Veer Savarkar, the man who could have prevented the partition. My question is, do you think the partition that India faced in 1947 could have really been avoided?
Certainly. It was a self-goal on the part of Congress. Savarkar joined politics in 1937. That time Subhash Chandra Bose, S.M. Joshi, Achyutrao Patwardhan of the Congress, they invited Savarkar to join the Congress, but he refused. He says the Congress has gone so far ahead on the path of minority appeasement, it can't retrace its steps, and to indulge in Muslim appeasement at the cost of rights of the majority or the Hindus is betrayal of the nation. And therefore, and he also made it very clear that he is fighting for equal rights. He is not demanding special rights for the majority community, you know, and that's how he joined Hindu Mahasabha, which was a small party. But he thought that ultimately he had seen, because, you know, in 1930, Muhammad Iqbal, great poet into inverted commas, you know, he was the one who visualized today's Pakistan. In the 1930 session of Allahabad, he said that today's Sindh, Balochistan, Punjab and Northwest Frontier Province, I see a separate homeland for Muslims comprising these regions. And exactly 6 years later, as part of an Anglo-Muslim conspiracy, Sindh was detached from Bombay state, Mumbai presidency, so to say, correct? And Savarkar came out in 37. He was in internment in Ratnagiri and he joined politics. That time Savarkar said that detaching Sindh from Bombay presidency has very ominous signals for the nation and for the majority community. And he saw it from day one. He saw it as an Anglo-British conspiracy.
There is a view that had India remained united, it would have been a loose federation, because the British plans that were offered to India included one, of course, the partition, and the other one was a loose federation. You think that would have been a better idea?
No. He would have had the nation listen to him, had the Congress listen to his views, suggestions. You see, partition was caused by Congress's Muslim appeasement policy, of which Muslim League took full advantage. This is the main cause of partition. So the loose federation thing is very late. It would not have come. Savarkar was warning from 1937, and when he refused to join the Congress, he issued a statement also, which was very, I would say, it said everything, He said, first he said that indulging in Muslim appeasement at the cost of Hindu rights, it's betrayal of the nation. Then he said it is better to stand, to justify why he is joining Hindu Mahasabha. He said it is better to stand in the last row of patriots than the first row of betrayers. So he had been warning from 1937. You see, Pakistan was visualized by Muhammad Iqbal in 1930. The same Muhammad Iqbal whose poems are recited in India without knowing that he is the person who caused our motherland's partition, correct? Then the word Pakistan was coined by a Gujar Muslim from Punjab called Rahmat Ali Chaudhry while he was studying in Oxford. And the scheme was given shape by Jinnah. The name Pakistan was already there in public domain from 1932 onwards.
You said that it was an Anglo-British conspiracy. But if we were to really look at evidence that you have collected in your book, that you have presented in your book, is there a definitive, a substantive evidence to this theory that there was a conspiracy against India?
Yeah. I mean, we have not gone to the British side so much, but yeah, certainly. I mean, what they did eventually, it proves that they were trying to do it from beginning, So I think there is not much evidence needed, There is enough evidence to believe.
But was there any...
And Savarkar had warned the Sindhis, don't go by Congress propaganda. You are in danger. And Sindh was one province where the majority of Hindus was substantial in many areas. When India was partitioned, Karachi had 51% Hindus. It was not like Punjab or Bengal, where Muslim majority was very thick. Here it was not so.
So would you say that...
On the whole, of course, on the whole, Muslim was in majority, but then a thin majority, I would say.
Would you say that the Congress got fooled by the British, or are you saying that Congress was part of the Anglo-British conspiracy against India?
No, it was not a part of Anglo-British conspiracy. Congress was so obsessed with this idea of Hindu-Muslim unity that it could not think beyond that, I mean, Hindu-Muslim unity at any cost, I have called it Hindu-Muslim unity at Hindu cost. And this started from 1916 onwards. The Lucknow Pact was the first step, then came Khilafat, where the Muslim appeasement policies of Congress, went ahead by several times as compared to 1916. And then they continued all through.
Where do you think was the first mistake committed by the Congress?
The first mistake was Lucknow Pact. Lucknow Pact was the first mistake. I have said in my book that the pan-Islamist strategists could not befool only three people in Indian politics. One was Veer Savarkar, another was Dr. Ambedkar, and third was B.S. Munjay. B.S. Munjay was a very well-known and a very respectable Hindu Mahasabha leader. The person who can be credited with opening up the army to all castes. He was the one who forced the British to open army recruitment to all castes. Otherwise, earlier, only the Kshatriya communities were being recruited,
The book suggests that Veer Savarkar could have been India's security strategist had the Congress really listened to him.
Absolutely.
Now tell me, what was the security perspective from his point of view?
His perspective was that in India, all should be treated equally. He was not fighting for special treatment for Hindus. His language was very harsh sometimes, about the Muslims. But then the fact remains that his Hindu manifesto says it very clearly, that in independent India, all castes and all religions will have equal rights. He goes a step further and says that should anybody try to hinder the prayers of religious minorities, the state will step in and protect them. But at the third point, he warns that the nation will not allow creation of a nation within a nation in the name of religious minoritism. And that has been the story of India over the last most of the 70 years. We were partition happened in 1947. Within 10 years, Pandit Nehru forged an alliance with Kerala Muslim League, the very party which had caused India's partition. So he was very clear about it that, and his theory is very expansive, I would say. His theory is not just limited to Hindu Muslims, or unity. He was a great visionary of India's security, India's diplomacy.
What was the diplomacy part in his?
We were into non-aligned movement. Nehruji had very different ideas. He did not oppose so much the invasion of Tibet by China. So in 1954, when Nehruji came with a doctrine called Panchsheel, that if these 5 principles are followed by India and the neighboring countries, they would be able to live in brotherhood and peace. That time Savarkar warned. Savarkar said, Pandit Nehru, after what they have done in Tibet, if you talk in such weak terms with China, China's thirst for swallowing land will increase. And I won't be surprised that China attacks India and swallows India's land. That is what he said in 1954. Then another statement he made was that Pandit Nehru, your Panchsheel consists of beads of the rosary. The Panchsheel of China is submarines, bombs, machine guns, tanks. And then he appealed to the Indian youth that beware of the direction in which this government is taking our nation. Our policy should be that if a nation produces hydrogen bomb, we should produce oxygen bombs. And so he was a votary of India going nuclear from day one.
Sardar Patel, whom the right wing actually looks up to as an idol, as somebody who really saved India and integrated the entire country. Would you say that Savarkar and Patel were on the same page, or were they also on 2 different tangents?
No, they were on the same page. But Savarkar would go further, Savarkar had a vision for India's diplomacy.
Would you say that Sardar Patel did
Sardar
not
Patel died very early, Savarkar lived till 66. But Savarkar, there is not much we know about, his international vision, Sardar Patel's, Had he been the Prime Minister, he would have been called upon to.
But I think he did have a certain sense.
He also warned on China. He
also
warned on China.
China, he warned on Kashmir. In fact, he was the one who really criticized Nehru on going to the UN.
Yes, he did. But Savarkar goes several steps further, I mean, he delineates his vision, the policy in a very clear-cut terms, He says no 2 nations can be permanent friends or permanent enemies, because the definition keeps on changing according to the needs of the nation.
So
then he said, an enemy's enemy has to be seen as our friend. And that's how he advised Subhash Chandra Bose. Not many people in the nation doesn't know that Subhash Chandra Bose, his decision to flee India, get the help of Germany and Japan and Axis powers, for the objective of freeing India from British rule, was inspired by Savarkar. It was Savarkar whom Subhash Chandra Bose met in 1940 and then decided, Savarkar told him, Savarkar shared all these things in 1952 when he folded up his Abhinav Bharat secret revolutionary organization. In that speech, he has said how he advised Subhas Babu. He told Subhas Babu, Subhas Babu, what are you doing? Going to jail means nothing. You have to make a much larger effort. He said, China, Germany and Japan should be seen as our friends. You go to Germany, free the soldiers who have been caught, Indian soldiers, and use them to attack India.
This perception about Veer Savarkar is not known. All we have known is Veer Savarkar was a coward. He did not stand up for the freedom struggle of India. There are allegations that he was an agent of the British. He pleaded several times before the British to free him. Why did that happen? Why is there so much mythology?
You see, if you read our book, which is entirely based on facts, you will find that Savarkar is the greatest symbol of India's integrity and unity. And those forces who follow an aligned ideology, those who don't criticize China's aggressive designs on India, those forces who are captive of Muslim vote bank politics, for them Savarkar is the greatest danger. Savarkar becomes the icon of the youth. Then because they subsist on fragmented India. These parties and those ideologies, they subsist on fragmented India. And Savarkar is the biggest symbol of India's unity and integrity, as we see it after our research which we have done in this book, So it is imperative for them. If Savarkar becomes the icon of this nation, then first he is the greatest symbol of nation first. So if just imagine if every Indian adopts his nation first ideology, where will India go? India will progress by a speed which will be many times faster than today's.
Tell our audience, what was the objective of the British in keeping India fragmented?
They had their geopolitical vision,
Explain it for our audience.
You see, they drew the Durand line to divide the Pathans. So they wanted to rule the world, How do you rule the world? You fragment people, It is easier to rule small groups. It was their policy everywhere. But India, it is more apparent because India was a big nation in terms of population, in terms of geographical area. So they tried to divide Afghanistan also by laying the Durand line, So that was, they had this vision of ruling the world forever. It was part of a larger game plan,
If we were to now look at Veer Savarkar after 70 years or more, would you say that Veer Savarkar was essentially a freedom fighter? He was essentially a hardcore nationalist who was misunderstood by people.
Misrepresented, not understood. Misrepresented by interested parties. I'll tell you one small thing. In 1938, he saw that Muslims are entering the army in large numbers. In 1939, the Second World War began. And he saw that the percentage in terms of population ratio of Muslims was much higher in the army. And he could see that partition, with the kind of policy Congress was following, partition might take place. In 1940 itself, when he warned, look here now, we are inching towards partition. That time, leaders of Congress said that partition will happen on our dead bodies. And Savarkar proved correct after 7 years,
Yeah.
So in 1939, when he saw, so he took up a campaign for Hindus to join the Indian army. And they joined in large numbers. And because, even Muslim League was aware that it will finally succeed in its design,
They were aware? Are you saying they knew
no,
it before
they
then?
opposed the recruitment of Hindu soldiers, In between 1939 and 1944, Muslim League has opposed Savarkar and Hindu Mahasabha at least 4 times, protesting before the British that the number of Hindus joining the army is very large, this is a threat to us. This was really a threat to Pakistan in future, Correct? Yeah. Now just imagine at the time of, after partition, had India been weaker in military terms, then Pakistan would have attacked, because they used to say that Haske liye Pakistan, lad ke lenge Hindustan. So had they been stronger, much stronger than India, then they would have attacked, I think, the Rajasthan border, the Gujarat border. So Savarkar's vision was unparalleled, I would say. He could see things. We have called him a father of India's national security and diplomacy, because he predicted almost all the problems which India has faced in the last 70 years on the national security front about 60 to 80 years ago.
You made a very pertinent point. You're saying that the Congress party accepted partition on the dead bodies of Hindus. And you are saying that this offer by the British was accepted only because they wanted to keep Hindus and Muslims united.
No, they wanted to avoid a civil war. You see what happened? Riots started taking place, Muslim League started triggering riots, And that time, when Savarkar saw that Congress is caving in, because Congress was bound by the slogan of complete non-violence, So he had no answer to the riots. So he said, if you surrender to this civil war, then just imagine those who are trying to divide the country on gunpoint. If they get guns, if they get, weapons and all the resources, what will happen? That is what is happening today.
Are you saying that today Muslims in India who in fact did not go to Pakistan but were in support of Pakistan, for example in UP where the biggest movement for Pakistan actually was in UP, but the people, most of them stayed back in UP?
No, I am talking about Pakistan. When Pakistan is born, you can't imagine, he told Kripalani, you can't imagine the situation. I mean, you are thinking that by agreeing to partition, Hindu-Muslim problem will be solved. But India will have greater problem on hands if Pakistan is formed. He is not commenting on the Indian Muslims. He is commenting on the formation of Pakistan.
My question today is this, that people who really launched the movement for Pakistan, they stayed back. Most of them stayed back in
Absolutely.
UP. Do you think the idea of Pakistan is still alive in India?
Not all, in some sections. There is a very big Wahhabi movement in the country, you know. A part of this Wahhabi movement is certainly has designs which are not conducive to the national integration, you know. And we are seeing it happening in Kerala and many other places, you know. But then I still believe that a very large section of Indian Muslims want to remain in the mainstream. And I think any policy has to take into consideration this fact, you know. In Kashmir also today, I haven't been to Kashmir, but I have been reading the situation. There is a significant section which is with India. All the encounters which have, all the liquidation of all the terrorists in the last 6-7 years, 90% of the information has come from Muslims, either in police or civilians in Kashmir. So there is a section of Muslims, significant section of Muslims in Kashmir who are with India, but they are scared of the terrorists. You know.
Now let me rephrase this question. Had we stayed as one united, larger India in 1947, you think we could have existed as a harmonious society with Hindus and Muslims having different political views, different ideologies, because at the end of the day, ideology of Pakistan would have stayed alive.
Ideology of Pakistan was allowed to fester, you know. Ideology of Pakistan was not there. In 1940, when Jinnah passed the Pakistan resolution on 23rd March 1940, that time many Muslim leaders from different parties opposed the resolution. Had Congress formed a joint front of Congress, Hindu Mahasabha and those Muslims who were opposing partition, the story could have been different. The communal poison was allowed to fester, you know.
Are you saying that the Congress made the mistake way before the partition, and had somebody really heard, whether it was Gandhi or Nehru, had they really heard Savarkar, they could have avoided both the partition and the civil war between Hindus
Absolutely.
and Muslims?
Congress accepted partition to avoid civil war and ended up accepting partition as well as civil war. So, no, a lot of people say that, Muslim power got divided because of partition. How can you say that partition was bad, I think I don't agree with that. What has happened is that Hindus in Pakistan have been driven out from there. In 1947, as compared to 1947, the number of Hindus, percentage of Hindus left in Pakistan, only 8%. Yes. In Bangladesh, there are only 28% Hindus left. This would not have happened. Had this would not have happened, then there would have been a sense of balance also in the society when there are equal number of people, or maybe the difference in population is less between two groups, then there is some balance also.
There is another point of view that let us say that it was one country. But do you think that Hindus and Muslims would have been able to first control or regulate or even govern in many ungovernable areas, for example, Northwest Frontier Province, which many people say, in fact, Americans call it the Wild West of Pakistan? No,
but we have to look at the situation before the Pakistan movement was born. There was one Badshah Khan, and don't forget that in the last 46 Central Assembly and Provincial Assembly elections, the last election before partition, they voted for Congress. The same people who are ungovernable, they voted for Congress. Let us not forget. So it is basically a self-goal. Pakistan was a self-goal.
Are we still doing that self-goal?
There has been a remarkable change in policies and strategy in the last 7 years, no doubt. But then you see, I'll put it this way, coming back to Savarkar's vision. 65 war. We won the war, but we did not conquer Lahore. We were only 13 kilometers away from Lahore. India accepted ceasefire under world pressure. And then Tashkent, we gave them whatever won we had. What our soldiers had won, we lost on the negotiation table. Correct? 71 war, Mrs. Gandhi did a good job of partitioning Pakistan. What was the end result? In spite of holding 93,000 soldiers, we could not settle the POK issue. On top of that, those three tehsils, sub-districts we had won in Sindh, we gave them back. And those Hindus thought that, when India won those districts, those sub-districts, those Hindus thought that they are now part of India, And when they saw that those districts have been given back to Pakistan, there was a huge migration. 1 lakh people have migrated. So they feared retaliation from Pakistani authorities. So we have, continuously lost on the negotiation table, and that is the biggest sign of, had Savarkar been there, this would not have happened. Had Savarkar's vision been accepted, this would never have happened.
What I am really gathering from this conversation is that India has been lacking the right security strategists, the right security experts who could never really understand geopolitics of the world, geopolitics of Asia, geopolitics of South Asia and the Indian subcontinent. And till date, we still have not had a Veer Savarkar like figure.
I think there are appreciable changes in the last 7 years. We have the title of our introduction is Dawn of the Savarkar Era. So what is Dawn of the Savarkar Era? Removal of 370 is Dawn of the Savarkar Era. Ram Mandir being built is Dawn of the Savarkar Era. I have always very strongly believed that after breaking, demolishing and destroying thousands of temples, the Muslim invaders, and after partition, why Hindus should not be able to build Ram temple? Why Kashi and Mathura can't be freed from those mosques which are attached to the temples? Why can't Muslims not say that we will move the mosque to outside this place and will have a new mosque built the way it's happening under court orders in Ayodhya? Why can't it happen?
I have one more question. The Vajpayee government looked at this whole issue almost on the same lines as the Congress party. In fact, Vajpayee went out of his way to approach Pakistan. He went out of his way to make friends with Pakistan, even as Pakistan was constantly conspiring against India in Kargil war, and in fact much later in Pakistan also perpetrated Mumbai terror attacks in 2008. What has shifted in the right-wing thinking? Because after all, Vajpayee, Advani, they also come from the Savarkar school of thought. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Home Minister Amit Shah ji also come from the same school of thought. Why has there been so much difference between these two strands of the BJP?
I think Vajpayee ji was misled by the political leadership, and now it is very clear that it was not Nawaz Sharif, it was Pervez Musharraf who did Kargil, So he got misled by the political, but Mr. Modi is a different player, I mean, he follows Chanakya, Krishna Niti or Chanakya Niti. So he has a different mind of his own, I mean, I find him closest to Savarkar's vision because, earlier we used to think that we will do this, what will happen, how will the world think. Now the policy is different. What Savarkar used to say that what is good for us we will do. Let the world think the way it wants.
In conclusion, we are saying we have had a similar set of security experts in the last 70 years, but it's the political leadership that has changed the course in India now.
No. You see, I won't, go that far. But certainly, Mr. Modi has a mind of its own, which is very close to how Savarkar used to think in terms of national security, in terms of diplomacy. I have read Shivaji very closely, being a student of history. My next book is on Shivaji. Emperor Shivaji, was he the greatest Indian of 1000 years? So, to understand Savarkar, to understand Modi, it is very important to read Shivaji, because they are drawing from Shivaji's vision.
This has been an enlightening discussion.
Thank you.
We will come back with another discussion on another book very soon.